In our next panel, we'll be talking to experts from an industry that has mobilized $10.8 billion to 586 enterprises and impacted nearly 500 million people over the last decade. That's a lot. The unprecedented crisis faced by humanity due to COVID-19 has made this sector all the more important in order to be more inclusive and to achieve our socio-economic goals. We hope this next panel becomes a useful guide for those working to make this happen and to all who are keen to understand the story of impact investing in India so far and its truly incredible potential. Joining us for our next session to moderate, we have Bhavna Kumar, former Samsung Next. Along with her, we have our panelists, Reddy, founder and former CEO Sierra Atlantic, Cherny, CEO Aspiration, and Kavita Gupta, co-founder FinTech TV. Over to you, Bhavna.
Thanks, Obi. Hi, everyone. Welcome to ThinkIndia's panel discussion on impact investing. My name is Bhavna Kumar, and I'm an operating partner working closely with international early-stage startups with a focus on Asia and specifically the dynamic Indian ecosystem. I'm excited to be hosting this panel today as we will be discussing how the power of public and private support can be unleashed to make the world a better place. I'm joined today by three very influential international business leaders that are passionate about impact investing as well. First, we've got Kavita Gupta, who is the co-founder of FinTech.tv and the Delta Blockchain Fund. She has over 15 years of experience in technology and social impact investment via the World Bank, IFC, and the Eric Schmidt Family Office. Kavita was the founding managing partner at Consensus Ventures, a founding team member of the Green Bonds at IFC, and is a strategic advisor for UNICEF and the Center for Capital Markets Competitiveness at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. She's also a visiting scholar and at Stanford University. Kavita, welcome.
Thank you so much, Bhavna.
Next, we have Reddy, who is a prolific angel investor, entrepreneur, and mentor to many founders. Raju founded Sierra Atlantic, a company that grew to be a best-in-class global services business over a period of 17 years before being acquired by Hitachi. Raju is also a venture advisor with leading investors, including Inventus Capital, and sits on various boards, including Iltropy, HealthCube, Belong.co, and Redbus, which was acquired by Naspers. Raju is currently a board member of RAND Corporation Center for Asia Pacific Policy, FalconX, and Enact Arts. He is also a charter member of Thai Silicon Valley. Lovely having you here, Raju.
Thank you, Bhavna. Glad to be here.
And last but not least, we have Cherny, who is the co-founder and CEO of Aspiration, a company that offers help for people and companies to offset their carbon footprint. Andre has worked for nearly 20 years to make the financial system more open and fair. Along with being an advisor to some of America's largest corporations, he's also been a Navy Reserve officer, a senior aide in the Clinton White House, and a financial fraud prosecutor. As a co-founder of the Democracy Journal, Andre helped launch the fight that then became the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. He is also a best-selling author of 2 books, The Next Deal and The Candy Bombers. Thank you for being here, Andre.
Great to be with you.
Excellent. So let's talk about our topic at hand. The numbers prove that the rising popularity of impact investing isn't just anecdotal anymore. According to the Global Impact Investing Network, the size of impact investing measured as assets under management has grown by 42% in the last year, from 502 billion to 715 billion in 2020. Impact investing is going mainstream, and we're here to discuss what that means for India. So let's start by understanding the problem at hand and the roles corporations can play to alleviate some of that pain. So this question is to everyone here on the panel. So the question is, the world as we know it is undergoing a crisis in respect to climate change. Global temperatures have risen by more than 2 degrees Fahrenheit since the 19th century, and Antarctica is losing nearly 150 billion tons of ice per year. As of Feb 2021, India has become the home for more than 2 million corporate enterprises, making it one of the largest as well as the fastest growing business regions. It's adding productivity, but also adding a lot of carbon footprint. So, in your minds, what can these corporations do to put their best foot forward in minimizing negative impact on the environment while maximizing long-term value creation? And I'd love to start with you, Kavita.
I was hoping you're not going to start with me, but let's start with it. I think the statistics which you said, that itself basically picks up the whole picture, paints the whole picture of the world, that it is not, first of all, a very local problem. We started working on green bonds back in 2007, launched it in 2009, and we were trying to move multi-billion dollars from the public markets for the cause. And from that time, I remember still answering that it's not a local problem at US or India or China. It is actually a global problem. And somewhere till today, if you go to COP26, you go to COP21, you're still answering the same question, that it is not emerging market versus emerged market. It is very globally connected problem. And I don't think when there is something which is globally connected problem, as unfortunately we just saw with COVID, one country or one city can solve it. I feel like this is just not a public sector, private sector, individual partnership, but also with respect to every entity involved. If you ask me, like in 2 or 3, just like these are the things we have to do, of course, very, very difficult, but I think from individual practice of asking for renewable energy, asking for our investments, our money, and every dollar which go moving towards sustainable and renewable world, towards voting towards it, towards your government, but also at the public market and the private market. I feel like if we use the power of dollar, which I have seen again and again moves the needle in a big way, is what we all have to do. And we have invested from when I was at IFC or Richmond Family Office, a lot of companies like Acclima, Natal, Saildrone, bunch of technology companies which can enable that movement from the tech side. But for me personally, I've always seen the power of making sure that every stakeholder asks to move towards sustainable work.
That's excellent. That's excellent advice for our stakeholders. Raju, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, so I think in some ways what the corporations in India do is will be determined in many ways by the similar factors or same factors as corporations anywhere else in the world. One is their customers, right? And India does have the advantage of the youngest population, definitely of any large, populated country in the world, right? With about half the country being 25 years or under. And the entire awareness and this movement around, climate awareness and everything really started with the youth. So I think that's one thing India has going for it. And the corporations that are addressing the consumer needs in India are certainly the young people make a huge chunk of that, today and in coming years. So I think more initiatives around raising awareness and creating the channels, and a lot of that is already happening organically, amongst the youth within India. Most of that, I would say, is confined to the urban centers, but increasingly the rural India is also becoming more aware of it, and there are conversations like that. I spend a lot of time in India, mostly in rural India, around some of the non-profit initiatives that you talked about early on. So that's one thing from the consumers. Second, clearly the investment that you talked about, the entire impact investment, how that has grown. I think that's certainly a big part of it because the corporations are driven by what the investor community does. And third, I would say is the competition that is coming from the startup ecosystem. India today has a very vibrant startup ecosystem, and it's the third largest by some measure just by looking at the number of startups. But increasingly, there are exceptional startup entrepreneurs and companies that are coming out of India, addressing not just the opportunities within India but also the global markets. Right. Recently, there was a big public offering of a company called Freshworks on Nasdaq, and They said there were actually Indian flags flying there, the NASDAQ offering, which is kind of interesting. And I think there are several more like that to follow. So I can get into some specific examples of some of these startups that are beginning to challenge the status quo of the large corporations, mostly in the automotive industry or even in some of these companies, interestingly in space technology and all that allow you to track sort of pollution hotspots around the world. So there's a lot of innovation starting to come out of India now, not just for the market in India, but also for the global market. So I think the startup ecosystem also will play a big role in driving, some of the changes forward in the corporate India.
Excellent. And I'd love to dig into that a little deeper as we go along in this, in terms of the role of entrepreneurship with you. Thank you for sharing. Andre, any thoughts from you?
I'd second a lot of what has been said thus far, and especially what Raju was saying around the customer role. We're in the midst of what is likely going to be the fastest, largest shift in human behavior in history. It needs to be over the next few years if we're going to have any chance at success at meeting this crisis in a way that allows us to pass on the kind of world we want to leave for our future generations. And thus far, over the past few years, the leading force really has been top down. It's been impact investing. It's been ESG investing. It's been government that has pushed businesses to change the way that they operate. But what you're seeing increasingly now is bottom-up pressure, bottom-up from the customers that Raju was describing, from employees who are coming to the companies with which they spend their time as consumers and which they spend their time as employees, and asking, in fact, demanding that those companies join and lead the fight against the climate crisis. And that force is going to be one that is going to be increasing month after month, year after year as we go forward. In fact, there's no turning back. There's not going to be a year in the foreseeable future in which any business out there is going to be spending less, having to do less than it did in the year prior when it comes to sustainability and climate change. We're in the 0 to 1 moment, and we're seeing that in really economies all over the world, where companies are waking up to this demand, waking up to this expectation, and realizing that they have a financial imperative to meet that demand and meet that expectation, that it's not something they're doing out of the kindness of their heart or because of their conscience. They're doing it because they have to do it to be able to win those customers and win those employees that they're trying to retain and recruit. And this 0 to 1 moment is in many ways like the early days of the internet. There's some sustainability focused companies that are out there, the Aspirations and others of the world, in the same way that there used to be .coms that were separate and apart from the rest of the economy. And then there was this period in the late 90s, early 2000s, when just about every business out there decided we need a website. We need to take our business online. Those businesses that were most successful were those that didn't just put up something as a placeholder, but really change the way that they do business. And I believe you're going to see the same thing around sustainability, where so many companies that aren't even thinking about sustainability or maybe think of it as an afterthought are going to have to be putting it front and center into what they do every day, into that customer journey, into that employee experience, if they're going to succeed and thrive. And as we have a conversation like this 3, 4, 5 years from now, you'll see a broad scale expectation of every business that people are interacting with on a daily basis, stepping up to the plate and doing its part.
Excellent. I mean, you're right. This moment that we're in, the 0 to 1 moment, is so exciting that the future will be a better place, because this will be part of mainstream. Sustainability will be part of the way we do business, not just an afterthought or a nice thing to do. I'd love to look into that a little deeper with you, Andre, because you are, as a CEO and founder of Aspiration, a company that is built on the foundation that customers come first and investments should be directed towards bringing about a positive change. In today's world, is where we stand, where profit maximization is still seen as one of the catalysts for key corporate decisions. How are you able to bring about impactful changes while maintaining that financial well-being of the company? Also, kind of a step two into this question, really focusing on India. Since India is such a fast-growing economy, what will be the key in ensuring that a successful long-term strategy for a company whose main purpose is not profit maximization, but is social and environmental well-being?
Well, I think it comes back to that conversation that we were just having. I believe that there isn't a direct, hard and fast distinction between profit maximization and meeting the climate crisis. If we really believe that we are in the midst of this once in a century, once in a few centuries kind of transformation of how we do business, that opens up enormous opportunity. And the companies that do best in terms of meeting that sustainability challenge are going to be those companies that do best financially. And those that don't meet it are going to be left by the wayside. And so I believe that aspiration has been successful, is going to be successful, not in spite of what we do around fighting the climate crisis, but in fact because of it, because that is our business, and because we help so many other businesses that are trying to meet this challenge. We work with so many businesses in the US and around the world that are thinking about how they are going to get to net zero, how they're going to reduce their climate footprint, how they are going to change the way that they operate. And they're doing so, again, not because of pressure coming from their investors or employees, but because the very customers that they're trying to win are demanding that they do so. And that means that the whole equation really changes about what is the way to reach profitability and success. And for us, it is really empowering these companies for whom it's not enough to just maybe say that you're going to get to net zero by whatever date, but they need to show their customers every day that they're doing so. They need to show their employees that they're trying to recruit and retain that they're doing so. And they believe that by doing so, they're not going to pull back on their profitability, but in fact advance it. And I think that's going to be true for more and more companies as we go forward.
Excellent, and that is the future we want to live in. Do you feel, in your experience, as you think about India, that this will work? And do you feel that this is, like Kavita was mentioning, a global enough trend that we're going to see that same consumer expectation set in, and that'll then lead to corporate changes as well?
Oh, I think you're already seeing it. I think you're seeing it in so many parts of India and of the consumer economy. And for the reasons Raju spoke about this generational shift, for the reasons that we know around the impact of the climate crisis, I believe actually India is going to be a leading force when it comes to a consumer movement demanding change, demanding that companies do better and that they help individuals do better when it comes to the climate crisis. It is those places in the world that are feeling the brunt of climate crisis that are going to be leading, and it is those places of the world where young people, those people who have the most at stake and the most at risk, who are going to be leading, and India is at the heart of that.
Can I quickly add something there to what Andrew is saying? I think also, not only from the private sector, I think India is very unique in a way that the government, starting from whether it's a CSR, which is 1 to 2% for every corporation towards that, or whether the government is saying 2030 to 2040, these are our goals, setting up those goals irrespective of whatever they are promising at COP and really going in that direction. We are seeing some of the biggest companies, like just taking an example in the history, we have always thought about Adani groups as more on the mining side, doing some of the biggest green bonds in the country and working with BSC in creating a complete international zone for international people to international organizations to come and invest in those sort of products. So I feel like something which has been super fascinating when you observe as an Indian and an American is that a country like India basically is also fostering it from the government side. Not just purely by giving tax rebates, which we see at most of the places in Europe and US, but also from that thinking perspective and making the optics of how it should be. So when Aspiration Bank or projects like those come to a country like India, we saw that everything from the government perspective and infrastructure perspective is super, super easy for them. And that makes it a very helpful and welcoming economy.
Excellent points. That's also the perfect segue into something I wanted to touch on with Raju next. Is really that role of the government in a country like India. And so, Raju, the UN has laid out, as Kavita was mentioning as well, has laid out 17 Sustainable Development Goals for 2030, encompassing elements of society, environmental and diversity, and innovation. India is ranked 117th on that list to track and achieve those goals. With such a large population, as you mentioned, a large population, a young population, what do you think that the government of India can do to fast track these goals? And what role should entrepreneurship be playing to help us reach those goals?
Great. Yeah. So one thing, a lot of the things that the government should be doing or can do, fortunately, are also tied closely with the things the government should be doing to grow the GDP. For instance, in the field agriculture, about 45% of India's workforce is in agriculture, producing less than 15% of the GDP. Okay, and by some measure, about 70% of the population depends on that. 45% of the workforce is, but 70%, if you count their families and all that, 70% of the population, relies on agriculture, right? And it's sort of associated industry. So clearly, that's a huge mismatch somewhere in the productivity of the nation, right? And if you think about it, over the last 50 to 60 years, there are a variety of factors. I mean, it's that we can go into, but there's been a serious contamination of the soil with the excessive use of pesticides, fertilizers, and all of that. I mean, just to take one specific example of an issue relating to sustainability, right? And also a lot of marginal farmers, meaning farmers that have 1 or 2 acres on an average. And so the combination of things, and we've all heard about the news about farmer suicides and all kinds of very serious social issues, right, that have been caused by all that. So I think there is much more awareness of that now, and of course there is this controversial farm laws that were passed. One of those farm laws, actually, personally, I think it's one of really good things that the government has done. They probably should have done more of it faster. But clearly, in any democracy, I mean, India, the beauty of it is it's a vibrant democracy. It's chaotic, but it is a real democracy. And so clearly, so you'll always find different points of view on some of these things. But one of the important things within the farm laws is, for the first time, allowing companies to sublease land from the farmers. And, that way they can, unless you have tens of acres, if not hundreds of thousands of acres, you cannot bring in a lot of these sort of productivity improvements, right? So I know, since your question is also about entrepreneurs, I know a startup in rural India, North Telangana, called Aggregator, started by young Alans from BITS and IIT Bombay, that are building this. They're actually going to the farmers, and they've started this process only after the farm laws were passed, right? And they were able to, and they're actually able to create reliable employment for the farmer that previously owned a 1 acre lot. And so the farmer is also very happy. Now he or she has a reliable stream of income. So things like that are starting to happen in India now. So some of these are sort of structural things. Now, another example that has gotten some attention lately, the transportation, highways and ports minister, Mr. Nitin Gadkari, talks about this, how they work with a team out of IIT Madras to, incorporate this technology where they take plastic and, put that into the concrete that's going into a lot of the new highways and ports that are being built in India. So I think there are such, specific examples that are happening, but structurally, I think, something around agriculture will go a long way. Now, there are also other, since the question is about the entrepreneurs and government, one of the government institutions that has done an exceptional job in India over the last, pretty much since independence is ISRO, the Indian Space Research Organization. And there's just an amazing young entrepreneur called Awais Ahmed that's building this company called Pixel that, basically is launching a bunch of nano satellites that take hyperspectral imaging. Hyperspectral is something that goes down to like 5 meters range. There's only one company today, a company out of China that does hyperspectral imaging, That's a 10-meter resolution. So at 5 meters, what happens is you can actually detect if there are methane gas emissions somewhere in the world, or any mining things. So all kinds of pollutants. So you can actually imagine like a visual of the entire globe at any given point in time. You can actually say, oh, here are the pollution hotspots that are happening, right? That's what Pixel can do. And that's being enabled because of the ISRO capabilities. Now that's a US company, but built out of India with ISRO and a lot of those scientists, and working with some of the folks here that came out of NASA. So I think now that's because your question was about entrepreneurs and government. I just wanted to give that specific example. So I'm very encouraged. So I think while India has its own share of serious problems with sustainability, I think India can also be a leader in the solutions for the world, not just for India, in addressing some of these issues we're talking about.
Excellent. And it's true. This unique bond that we're seeing, this partnership that we're seeing between public, private, but really startup government. It's startups working with the government that can create magic where all of the kind of efficiencies that might be lacking in one system can be fulfilled by another more nimble one. And a great example, agri-tech being that excellent example that we can fuel that fire as well as space tech. Thank you for sharing that, Raju. My next question is to you, Kavita. So it has a few different elements to it, so bear with me. So you're an entrepreneur yourself, and being an entrepreneur in fintech and impact investing through the show, The Impact, what are some of the challenges that you have faced, since both of these spaces are beyond the realm of conventional enterprise? Also, what are some of the challenges associated with raising money for startups, especially in India, which is directed towards social impact? Is there any stigma, and how do you get about that? How can founders pursue this route in a way that's also maximizes profit?
Yeah, no, it's a very, very good question. I think 7 years back or 8 years back, the terminology impact investment was always considered like a charity terminology, that like nobody wanted to talk about double bottom line, triple bottom line. For them, the bottom line is zero. You're just giving charity. And a lot of amazing companies in the space has changed it. And also funds like Avishkar or Asha Impact Fund in the country have absolutely changed the way. I remember when the Avishkar founder was initially going through the journey of raising his capital for the fund, and I met him a long time back in 2007 or 8. Always the story was, how do I explain that these companies are also technology driven, still going to be unicorns, but it's also going to be impact. And everybody would tell him, dial down on impact, just sell the technology and the return factor associated with it. But I think over time, with companies like Nepra, as we are talking about in India, it's the first waste management company in the country which actually has multi-million-dollar revenues, and started from 4 people, giving people who are going on the street and picking up all the waste, actually giving them technology, enabling them and making them the profitable stakeholders in the space. Companies like that are changing the way impact investment is looked upon. And so today, there are so many funds, especially in the country, India. And I have to underline, India is very ahead, even with respect to impact investment fund when you compare it with Europe or when you compare it with any other region. India is the first, then of course, Africa has a lot of impact investment funds in the companies. But I feel like now no one talks about tax subsidies in India for an impact investment companies. Nobody talks about charity. And I think we are at a very good phase. So from connecting it back to what you also asked me very quickly, when we started thinking about the impact show, exactly this is what we wanted to do. We wanted to bring in such founders and the investors because they exist. They are doing really, really well. They have like 20x returns, 40x returns on their companies, but they never had a platform to really spread that awareness about it. And so I remember when the Nepra founder came, that is how even I got to know about the company, which I thought I know about this ecosystem very well. I was so surprised. I was like, can I invest in your company now? Too late, they're about to do IPO. But yeah, it's pretty well.
That's excellent. And really feeling that power and momentum behind this, where you don't have to tiptoe about your key value proposition anymore, is it's really an exciting time that we're living in. And I'd love to, you started talking about the funding in India and how that's grown. I'd love for all of you to comment and help us think through this, right? What more can India do? So over the last 10 years, it is true that India has attracted more than $10 billion in impact investments, dedicated funds. And these investments have grown at a rate of 26%. This is great momentum. But for a country which has the highest density of NGOs in the world and one of the most environmentally driven activist population, there could be, 10 billion can still be a minuscule amount. So I want to ask all of you, what do you think is being done right in India? And where do you think India can improve in terms of attracting more of these ESG-driven funds? And Andre, I'd love for you to kick us off.
Well, I probably have the least experience in this group on that subject, but have some as we've been doing more and more with aspiration in India. And I think the dynamic that you're describing is one that sometimes takes a little bit of time to take hold, right? There is this large activist population. There is this work happening on the ground in the way that Kavita and Raju described. And my experience is that change happens slowly and then all at once. And I believe that we're on the precipice of this all at once kind of moment where this process of acceleration takes hold and suddenly starts building on itself. We've seen that all in places all over the world. We've seen it in the United States, even over the past 18, 24 months. The speed of growth in the impact investing space and sustainable investing space has just doubled over and over again. With 2020, in terms of inflows into impact investing, was twice that of 2019. The first half of 2021 was as big as all of 2020. And that kind of dynamic is what I think we're going to be seeing in India over the next 2-3 years, as all of this very hard work that has been going on, sometimes feeling unnoticed, sometimes feeling too slow, suddenly starts feeding on itself and really gaining momentum.
That's excellent. I think it's very important to acknowledge that precedence, the fact that we're seeing this on a global scale and therefore can expect that result even in India. Raju, would love for you to take that on as well. What are your thoughts on what is India doing right and what more can we do?
Sure. I think impact investing still happens in the context of sort of the broader investment, right, in startup investments. And, I spend a lot of time with these product startups from India that are building products not just for the domestic market, but also for the global market, right? I tend to think of this like India is in a position to combine the best of both China and Israel, as in China with a large domestic market. So there are problems that, you can actually define, validate, test your products within your domestic market to some scale before you take them global. Israel, in the sense, Israel is probably one of the, best examples of startup ecosystems building products for a global market. So the only startup ecosystem that's very large, addressing markets within in their domestic country as well as globally is the US ecosystem, US startup ecosystem, right? Today, you look at any of these companies, we have hundreds of millions of users within US for the consumer apps and outside, but, across multiple sectors, even B2B. So I think India is the only startup ecosystem that can look more like US over the next, 5, 10, 15 years. And within that, and you're starting to see that now. Companies like Freshworks, Postman, all of these. So I think the impact investing will naturally follow that. And there are specific examples. Just the number of startups that have come out of India has been producing almost one unicorn every week now this year, almost one every week. And there were probably no more than 1 or 2 in a year 5 years ago. So just think of the scale of what's happening in India. And some of that is actually flowing into impact investing. Back to Kavita's point about when you talk about impact investing, it's not the double bottom. What is socially good is also very good for the bottom line and for your pocketbook. I'm just thinking this wonderful example of this startup by two young women from IIT Delhi, I believe, called Animal spelled with a L, double L at the back. And so they come from families where their dads were dairy farmers. So they have now started an online cattle trading company. And that within about 3 years, it grew to be 2,500 crores GMV, which is roughly about $300 million. A very substantial company. So now all the big funds are investing in that. Now, is that impact investing? Absolutely. Now, is it in the traditional impact investing sense? I don't know. Because India has, I read in that article about 75 million, families or dairy farmers and about 300 million cattle. So that's like, four cattle, four cows or buffaloes per farmer. Brazil has 1:300, right? So clearly, just like the agri productivity, again, in the dairy farming, it's a huge mismatch. So that's one of the things, over time, startups like this will drive the change. So I'm actually very, very, optimistic, once again, about the solutions that come out of India, serving not only India's needs, but truly for the world. There's nowhere else. Yes, of course, the challenges in India are very big, but you also have that many opportunities, right? To be able to come up with solutions that you can test, validate on tens of millions or hundreds of millions of people. So that's a very unique, opportunity in some ways for all these entrepreneurs who are, building these solutions. So I'm actually very, very optimistic about sort of India, being more at the forefront of this change.
That's really exciting. It's really exciting to hear of these examples that you're at that grassroots level and you're seeing that innovation happen in startups. And back to what Andre had said is that this is organic. This is happening organically, and we don't need to push it. We don't need, the agenda is very much there in the consumer mindset. Kavita, I'd love to hear from you as well. Any thoughts around, how can we attract more funding, and what can India do right?
I think the two things I would say, and this is coming from talking to funds actually more than companies, right? I think people still like to present, as Raju mentioned, more on the technology side, that this is a technology solution bridging this gap in the market. Though there is most of the things which you do, and this may not be a popular answer, but look at a company like Zomato, right? It's on the paper with the deep impact. People may not be an impact company. But if somebody cannot get out of the house and this is the only way to get food in the house, then it is an impact company, right? So I feel like we need to just revamp the whole image that, again, impact is not charity, and investing in a company which also has a huge impact associated is a big bonus. It's something which we should thrive for. It's something which we should go for. And we don't have to compromise on our bottom line all the time. I think India has done a really, really good job of being at the forefront of the impact investment entrepreneurs, but then taking and celebrating those impact investor entrepreneurs as unicorn entrepreneurs is not something what we have seen from the country. With NSE and BSC, only very recently started doing big press releases about these new age tech entrepreneurs going public. But we have not seen that at the international level as we should see. And I think this goes back to, Raju is at TIES in the Valley. And I think we should be doing some sort of like a monthly things with these guys, not only for the Indian community across the globe, but also for the non-Indian community to highlight these founders and their success ratios and how, even though they have made amazingly X returns, they also had a very impact-driven value system built in from day zero to achieve that, which is just a bonus without compromising on anything. I think that's one. And secondly, I feel like, and this is going back on a public sector space, if you look at NASDAQ, you look at NYSE, they do a very, very good job. Every time there's a company which is going public with some sort of sustainability, environmental impact built into it. We don't see that from India yet. We don't see that spatial ESG indexes, using that indexes to have different performances. It's happening and it's growing. Ashok Chauhan from BSC has introduced a lot of those parameters, but it's yet not there to the level. So those would be the two big thoughts from my side.
I completely agree. I think, as you've mentioned, there is a branding issue that it still persists, and it is something that we should be considering. How can we fix? It's great when we see companies like BlackRock come out with these massive funds dedicated to impact investing. We see Bain Capital come out with the second fund around impact investing for $800 million. It really helps create like that momentum that we need, that branding that we need, that this is for profit. But at that grassroots level, like you said, what can we do through the associations that we belong to highlight those stories and bring those out and show that these are like amazing companies that are run for good, but also are making money. Thank you so much, all three of you, for sharing your views. This was very exciting and interesting to hear, and I'm sure people have taken a lot of notes on things that they can do in their ecosystems to make impact investing more front and center. So I appreciate all of your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bhavna.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.